first year of business, had a website and didn't do anything with it, just assumed that people would find it. And, you know, before long, I realized that people weren't finding it. And even now, you know, I'd still like a lot more people to be finding it than they are, but we are working on that and have been working on that for some time. And I think it's really important that everybody, you know, if I had my time again, I would 100% be doing SEO from day one. And, you know, you might not have the budget to pay for an SEO team like I have now, but I would have figured it out and I would have done it myself, because really, as long as you're writing content on a website, you're going to get some sort of traffic to it. So, so first of all, Neely, thanks for joining us. And I don't know whether you want to say anything or introduce yourself, or I kind of might have stole your limelight a bit, but over to you.
Oh, you didn't. No, you didn't. That was so kind. Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm really excited to be, you know, involved in the club. I think everything you've said about community building and, you know, the whole idea of giving value and delivering value is so important, particularly within our industry. And actually, this ties exceptionally well with, you know, with copywriting and content writing. Copywriting and content writing are actually they're not really interchangeable terms, but, you know, we can get onto that a little bit later. But when it comes down to communicating anything to your audience, I think, you know, Ryan, your point about delivering value is probably the most important thing. Believe it or not, probably sometimes more important than sort of ticking those, obviously things like keywords and SEO is massively, massively important. But I know Ryan and I said that one of the things that we wanted to talk about today was talking about basically getting that balance right. So understanding the technicalities that goes into creating content and copy, how to make that SEO friendly, how to have the right conversion words in place. But then you also have to remember that things like that you can quite easily learn, you know, whether it's a course or you read a book or you learn it on YouTube, but that is only probably, you know, half of, you know, what I would say that part of my job is. The other half of it is learning how to communicate with people using the right kind of emotions, speaking to them like human beings. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with people, especially in the earlier stages of my career. I've been doing this for about 6 years professionally now. And how many times some companies have just given me a list of SEO, you know, words, keywords, and said, okay, you know, write whatever, as long as you can cram those keywords into it, then it's fine. Obviously, keywords are important, but the minute you stop sounding like a human being is the minute you'll, you know, lose your guests who are looking to book with you. It's one thing getting traffic onto your website using the right keywords and the SEO, but the trick is getting them to stay, getting them to actually engage with your brand. Otherwise, you're only sort of doing half the work. You're only getting them to that sort of halfway point in the transactional journey. If you actually want to convert into bookings, it's all about creating a relationship. And I think this is probably one of the biggest things that is a bit of an oversight, I think, Ryan. I know we've talked about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, as you said, the keywords might get them onto your website, but if you're not engaging them, then they'll quickly turn off. So, you know, that is wasted traffic. I think you do need to be, you know, writing, engaging stuff. And I mean, let's just take it back to when you're looking at somebody's website who would ask you to do some work for them. And by all means, you can use mine as an example, because I know you did that for me. What are the typical faults that a lot of people make when writing content for websites? Because there seems to be a very standard formula and certain pages that a lot of people copy, and really they're so far off the mark. So, I mean, what's your kind of top tips on that one, I think?
Such a good question. I think there are definitely like some myths or definitely things people do that you see so often. And I think what happens is that because people see so many other people doing it, they just naturally think, okay, I'll just regurgitate that. And then everybody ends up making the same mistakes. So really, really like basic stuff. You know, it's basic, but it's so, so important. And if you don't get these first few things right, then you'll struggle to actually get engagement and conversion from your website. So I think the first thing I see pretty much nearly all the time when I start working on websites within our industry is how companies, understandably so, because they love their businesses, talk about just their businesses and just their brands and just how amazing they are, which is, you know, fair enough, because they are obviously amazing. And yes, you should be proud of whatever awards and experiences, how long you've been in the industry, but always ask yourself the question when you're creating content for your website, are you actually answering the guests' questions? Because when a guest lands onto your website, they're constantly asking themselves, so what, or what's in it for me? You know, yeah, it's great you've got all this experience, but what's in it for me? It's great that you won 5 awards last year, but what's in it for me? Even something as fundamental as accreditation, like Luke Stays, for example, is IPRAC accredited, which is phenomenal. You know, it's something that every short-term rental company should absolutely have, but it's about sort of flipping it and making it about the guest. So really, sort of, to put it in layman's terms, I would say like less weing on your website, talking more about the guest, using the word you. For every we you use as a word, make sure you're using the word you 5 times. I know it sounds a little bit like mathematics, but you know, that's really how it should go. So that's the first thing. I think companies talking about themselves all the time. And a really easy way to spot that is to see how many times you start a sentence with the word you, our team, and, you know, things like that. So even for the about page of your website, you know, a lot of people would then turn around to me and say, well, you know, what about when it comes to actually talking about our story? Well, actually, there's a way to do that too. You know, it's important to talk about your journey and how that's helped you become credible, but always make it about the guest or the person you're doing business with, because ultimately, you know, human beings, we are selfish creatures. We're always looking at, you know, what's in it for us. And I think this applies to life and basically any industry in business. Once you can actually nail how to stop talking about yourself and to make everything you do about the service of others, I mean, that is pretty much the definition of hospitality. So, you know, if you can convey that into your copy and your content, then that is a massive part of the job done. So that's the first thing. I don't know if you want me to take a breather, if you want me to comment, otherwise I'll just be talking at you for like 40 minutes.
By all means, carry on, you're in full flow.
So yeah, that's the first thing. And then I'm not going into any particular order, by the way. These are the sort of the most fundamental things that I notice. Another thing is, you know, going back to the point we made before about, you know, keywords and content that's really difficult to understand and follow, and industry jargon. You know, little things like using language that is just laborious to understand, instead, you know, where you could just use simple sentences. I think a lot of the time we fall into the trap of over intellectualizing things because we think it makes us sound intelligent. But, you know, website copy is completely different to, say, content writing for a report or for a blog. Website copy works best. And, you know, there are reports and statistics to support this, that website copy works best when you are literally telling people what you are there for, what you're giving them. So keeping it simple is the most important thing. You know, talk, you know, literally write like you would speak to your guests. However, in saying that, and this brings me on to my third point, a lot of people then, I think, believe that because we are keeping it simple, we don't really need to worry about things like grammar, spelling, and flow. Now, this is not about everybody needing to understand grammar and everybody being good at school, because I know it tends to be quite a sensitive subject for some people. It's not about that, but you must understand that in order to break the rules sometimes, you need to know them. And, you know, regardless of what your brand is like, you could be the most easygoing brand, most laid back brand in the world. Again, reports and statistics show that if you have spelling mistakes and just grammatical errors in your copy, it's less likely to come up in search results. And, you know, again, I know it's a sensitive topic because a lot of people say, you know, well, you know, some people struggle with their spelling and things like that. But it is so important. A lot of people subconsciously don't realize, but when they spot a spelling mistake or anything that doesn't look technically correct, subconsciously, you kind of switch off. And also it looks unprofessional. It shows a real lack of attention to detail. Unfortunately, you know, people are judgmental. So your first impressions, they absolutely do count. And this is why it's quite important to work with a professional. If it's not something that you feel you're not very good at yourself, then even if you can't outsource your copy or your content writing, at least get it proofread, and get it proofread by somebody who understands how grammar works. Little things like, you know, the 3 dots you put at the end of a sentence, they're called ellipses. sometimes I see people using 4 dots or 2 dots or 5 dots. And in my mind, I'm thinking that looks so unprofessional, because there are people who will look at that and think that's not correct grammar. And unfortunately, again, it's the world we live in. A lot of people will look at that and think, okay, they're not professional. There's a reason why, where when you're looking at, fraudsters, for example, and scammers in any industry, but let's look at our industry, in the short-term rental industry, when you're looking at fake short-term rental operators, one of the top things people ask you to look out for is spelling mistakes. So that just goes to show how detrimental that could be to your brand's reputation. And I'm going to throw in another one too, because this is really important as well. Aesthetics is really important in copy and content writing. Obviously, the way something sounds and reads is the most fundamental thing, but how words actually look on a piece of paper and on a screen is really important too. If something looks too clunky, if you've got rules and rules of text, you will put people off. A lot of people will not, well, most people, yeah, they do prefer to just read smaller paragraphs, smaller sentences, not so small where you begin sounding like a robot. Obviously, it's important to have variety. But for example, if you're cramming in lots of copy into your website, which is great for SEO, because, that's something you should always be doing. Again, don't just copy and paste an article you've written in your Google Docs. If it's going onto your website, chances are you'll probably have to take the first paragraph and turn it into 3 paragraphs. So aesthetics is really important too. When you're looking at your titles, certain words being in bold, certain words being in italics, using punctuation like brackets, exclamation points, so the eyes have something interesting to look at rather than the same mundane words. It's all important stuff, and again, it does work. So
yeah. If anyone does have any questions, just pop them in the chat while we're talking and we will come on them. I think just picking up on a couple of things there in terms of tools that you can use. So keeping it simple is very much like there's kind of graded writing, and you can use, there's a very free tool called Hemingway app, and you basically type in your words, and you want to try and, am I right in thinking, try and write grade 6, grade 7, something like that, for a very simple, and that is exactly what it means, like grade 6 at school, grade 7 at school. So I think whilst you end up at, I don't know, grade 12s and 13s, basically it's saying write like an 8-year-old could understand. And that means the majority of people will be able to easily and quickly read it. And also, when you start using that tool, you'll start to realize that as you start paragraphing more and more and more and more, you end up going up the grades, which makes it harder to read. And as Neely's saying, if you're not putting it right and it's not in the right flow, i.e. the more words you're putting on, if you're not a professional at it, probably the more chance you've got of making a mistake and not getting it right. I mean, I know my grammar is absolutely terrible, and I'm definitely I think potentially dyslexic, but it's
that's why you have the tools, right? That's why the tools are excellent. So yeah.
And but I think at the start you give it a go, but then you can use these amazing tools to keep you right, and it's not that difficult to do it. It's more about just planning it rather than just blurbing it all out and just putting it all out there. But I think also, you can take what Neely's saying in terms of your content and, on your website and about me. And I talk about this all the time. And the minute you start to understand that, and I was saying this to our franchisees mentors last night, no one gives a shit about you. Like, they really don't. And, the minute you understand that, and you understand that you are in business to serve somebody else's pain points and solve their problems, then you will start to make leaps and bounds with your engagement and the amount of leads that start coming through your website. So I know we did funny, it ties in quite nicely to this, but we did a bit of a copywriting sort of workshop last night, and I was getting them to write them out, and one of them have posted in the group, just sort of said, what do you think of this? And whilst the frameworks there of how we kind of laid out, like the pain, the possibility, how the process works, the path, the call to action, that kind of works nicely, but it was still talking too much about how you want to solve a problem and how you want to do this, and how you want to do that, rather than, so I was basically looked at it and said, it's great in terms of the format and the points are there, but what they hadn't done is elaborate on how the points solve the pain and the problem for that end user. It's great that you offer rent guarantee, but what does that mean to somebody? Like, what does that mean to the end user? You know, so no voids, more profit, less hassle, and the list goes on and on and on and on. But it's about writing about that so that you will get somebody who reads it, who has experienced hassle, experiencing voids, experiencing those pain points, and therefore they'll want to read more and more. And I think that's, one thing about, definitely the work that we've been doing together, Nearly, we've definitely seen a boost in the engagement by, obviously the quality of the writing, but, we tell a lot of stories, right? I mean, that's kind of your thing, and that, let's just kind of transition into that a bit and how stories are so powerful.
Yeah, so stories, like you've said about, again, ties in so beautifully with making it about the guest and the person you're serving. So a lot of the time, I think people confuse storytelling in business with telling their own story, which is one way of doing it. But when it comes to, actually generating some kind, actually trying to sell something, in our case, it would be bookings. The story would be obviously the guest story. So applying it to a website, for example, the most important thing to kind of bear in mind when you're using storytelling in your website copy, like Ryan's mentioned, we talk about pain points more. So, and again, it really does require a bit of a mindset shift, because a story on a website does not necessarily mean once upon a time you woke up in the morning and you wanted to go on holiday, so you went to Luke's Days and you booked the holiday and you lived happily ever after, which is a great story, but that's not necessarily what we're talking about. Using storytelling techniques basically means that you can start this on your homepage, for example. So basic stories, you always have a hero, you always have a problem that the hero is trying to work through. There's always some kind of a bad guy or something that's standing in their way. And then at the end, we obviously have the solution, the happy ending. And more important than the solution itself, which is the final part that I think everybody forgets about, is what their world looks like after they've reached that solution, how their world is better, whether they feel better, whether they have a better experience. So these are the very basic key points you need to be hitting when you're using storytelling on your website copy. So coming back to the hero, for example, the hero, quite self-explanatory, would be your guest, the person that you're writing copy and your content for, which is why it's so important to talk about them and to use words like you instead of we. Place the hero, the guest, at the heart of the stories that you're telling. In storytelling, in English, literature and linguistics, we call this technique transportation. And what that basically means is that you're taking the reader, or you're taking the website visitor, you're placing them into the story that you're telling. So they're being transported into the story that you're telling, and then they inherently feel everything you're telling them that they're feeling. So going back to Ryan's point about the pain and the hassle, for example, of running your own short-term rental business. If you're a guest booking for a short-term rental property, again, the pain and the hassle of potentially booking with a provider you don't trust. So once you take them and put them into that story, they will naturally, without even realizing, start feeling those things. I mean, they would have been feeling them anyway, but you're basically reinforcing that because of the copy you're writing and because of the style of copy that you're writing it in. So without them even realizing, their brain's on alert and they're looking for a solution, because as human beings, that's what we're hardwired to do. We start looking for ways out, escape mechanisms. So once you start planting the answers in your copy, linking it directly, it's such a simple formula. You talk about the hero being in a certain situation, you talk about their pain points, then you talk about how you're offering a solution, then you bring it back to them, because you never end with yourself and how great you are. You bring it back to them and how their life has been made easier as a result of you presenting that solution as a guide to them, and they remain the hero of that story, if that makes sense. And then you can basically just repeat that technique over and over again for whatever part of your website you need. If it was for a blog, for example, you would keep doing the same thing until you hit all of their pain points. I think a really good way to do it is maybe to work backwards. I think, Ryan, you talk about this a lot too. Start with the end in mind. When it comes to anything, especially when it comes to something like content marketing, always think about the end result first. So this applies to the audience that you're writing for as well. Think about what they want and start creating your story almost backwards, in essence. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, just a quick example of a booking site would be, the end in mind is the guest booking and having a nice experience and, turn up to the property that's there and, and going from there. And then you'd work it back into the potential problems that they could face along the way booking. And, I guess we do a lot of watching what users do on our booking website through a tool called Mouseflow. And you can actually see what the users are doing on your website. It's not that expensive. You can watch each and every session, and we find that a lot of our users will actually get to our booking stage, like the payment processing part of it. They've found the property, they've done their dates, they get to that booking stage, and then they're going up to the WhatsApp button or the live chat button or the call button. They're not actually placing the booking there and then. They don't seem to want to put their credit card numbers in on our booking website as a vast majority. So we've kind of identified that as it's not a problem because they're still booking because they're ringing the phone. But I'd like to take the human element out of that and make it more automated. So it's, less hassle for me basically, and I need less staff, but it's also, I think, an easier flow. So there's a trust issue going on there, so why do they not trust us? Why do they not want to just book straight away? Are we not giving them enough information? So that sort of there, that in itself, by just understanding that, is a pain point that we can talk about, and we'll blog about it and we can do things like that. And it's not just as easy as saying, I'm going to get a direct booking website, or I'm going to get a website for my company built by someone for whatever, £1,000, £2,000 on WordPress. That's just literally the starting framework of it all. I've probably poured hundreds of thousands into my website team and everybody else that's around it to make it happen and get all the content out there over the years. And that all feeds into this area of getting people on that website. But even then, it still isn't good enough to convert the levels that I want it to be converting at. So, you've got to be constantly working on this game. And it is difficult when you're by yourself because you've got to wear all the hats. You've got to play guest manager. You've got to do the managers. You've got to organize the cleaners. You've got to do your marketing and everything like that. But you will grow, and I just think you should try and allocate an element of time. I know Grant Cardone was once my mentor, and he basically says 85% of your time is sales and marketing. The rest of it, ops and all that, you just kind of make it work. But 85% sales and marketing. Sales for us is acquiring deals. Marketing is obviously what we're doing with social media, posting websites, blogs, copy, etc., etc. And it's not a short-term fix either. So I've noticed, Jed, you've commented there saying, you're writing with keywords, and you started your website in November, which is amazing. But listen, you've got until probably November 2024, 2025 before your SEO is going to properly start kicking in. But that doesn't mean you stop, It's like every single day we're just, layering the breadcrumbs every single day, and then eventually we end up, with a good path that everyone then follows back to our website, and it's all over the place. You can't expect to just, it's like a tree, isn't it? We plant some seeds, and years and years later it's there. And unfortunately, that is what SEO is. But a lot of people get quite disheartened with it because of the long-term game that it takes. And it's not just as easy as writing keyword after keyword. That Google actually down rank you now for doing that. Because 5-10 years ago, it was just like, right, what's my keywords? Let's see how many times I can get on the page and make it sound like sense. Whereas now you don't even need to have the keyword in a sentence. So you could just have, like, if we had, say, service departments, Durham, we don't have to have service departments Durham in a line. We could just say, like, how to book a great holiday in Durham. And at some point in the article, we mentioned service departments, and Google links those three words together. So then if someone searches service departments Durham, that article stands a chance of coming up. So it is, I think Google have done that to make probably blogs and copy on websites actually start to read properly rather than just spamming keywords.
So to increase the quality of the content, because I think it's great, to be honest. And like you've said, Ryan, you don't necessarily need to have those words in that order. I think, sometimes the best thing to do is to have the keywords and the key questions, because key questions are so important too, in mind, and then just write about them. And remember, if you write about them, you will naturally mention those words. anyway. So, for example, if I was asked to speak about Ryan for the next 10 minutes now, I would naturally say his name, half a dozen times within those 10 minutes. So you will naturally do it. So have faith in yourself, in your ability to just write naturally. I think sometimes we kind of overthink it too. It's good to have it at the forefront of your minds, but sounding human has always been the preference, always,
Yeah, and I think you've also, it's SEO it's not just about writing content either. You've got to first, if you're not working on getting your site read by Google, which is an art in itself, you can use a tool called SEMrush for that, and that gives you so much data and insights, and it really helps you get your Google listings better and the quality and everything like that, which then means Google wants to help read it. But on that as well, you've got to be trying to get a lot of backlinks to your site. Now, what you mean by that is that somebody else's website is talking about your website, and that gets you so much credibility within searches. So, there's an art and a science, which I know is the same as what Neely was starting with just writing copy. There's an art and a science, which obviously I'll let Neely come on to in a bit, but it's the same with SEO work as well. There's not a one size fits all. It's very much just like you've got to go after the right keywords as well. Like, say for example, like let's say Jed, if for the last 3 years you've been going after a keyword that is potentially high ranking and a very low probability of ever being successful for your business, because maybe you've got something like book a hotel. That'll be Airbnb, Booking.com, all those. There'll be teams of SEO people writing content with that keyword. Everybody is writing content with that keyword because that's probably the most searched when someone's going to book a hotel. So if you try to compete with that word, chances are your efforts are going to be a bit in vain and they're not going to penetrate. Whereas if you actually use like these cool tools like SEMrush and you type in book a hotel, it'll also give you loads of alternatives. But on those alternatives, it might say, well, search volume's medium to low on this, but the chances of you getting ranked on it is actually very high. So you then just choose a load of these littler keywords and longer tail keywords, and you write about them. And you might, you're not going to get the 80 billion searches a month, but you might get 2,000 searches a month for that keyword, which might be actually more specific for your business. And chances are that people that type that in are going to land on your site. And then if your site's good enough and it oozes trust, then it will convert. And these are this is like, I could talk marketing all day long, so I absolutely love it. But, this is where you've got to get your brains if you want to expand your businesses, because I do believe that deal sourcing will only get you so far, and acquiring property and meeting agents, that'll only get you so far. No one wants to live on Airbnb and Booking.com forever. And so you the bit in the middle is your marketing department. And for me, I've always worked in that department, spent more time in that department. And I do say that's probably how I've had the success I've had, because, well, let's be honest, no one would be in this room now if I didn't have a marketing brain and I wasn't pushing the marketing and getting the content out there and people know who you are, who your brands are, and, getting yourself out of obscurity. So it's really important that you kind of understand it's not SEO is not a just do this and you'll get that. There are so many different connotations to it all. But if you start to do bits of this and bits of that, you throw a bit of Google paid ads in there, again, around the right keywords, bid on your own brand because the click will be dead low. And, everything like that is just all playing into the part of getting more and more people onto your website. And over time that builds, and then naturally you start doing more direct bookings or getting more leads, or we get a lot of inquiries now for our management service or our rent guarantee service, because that's what's on our website, and we're trying to optimize that. But I did touch base on it then, Neely. So the art and science of copywriting, or the art or science, people think one or the other, but what's your kind of thoughts on that?
If it's an art or a science, I know that there seems to be like two camps where, lots of people are like, oh, writing is an art. You're kind of born with this innate ability to be able to write beautifully. And then some people, on the other side of the fence will say, oh, it's copywriting is a science and it's just understanding formulas and methods and things like that. I really firmly believe that it's both. I think it's definitely science when it's copywriting for a website, probably a little bit more, but there is an art required to it as well. And I think achieving that balance, which is quite difficult to do sometimes, but achieving that balance is when you've hit that sweet spot, and that's when you have the magic copy that everybody talks about, that makes so much sense, that converts, that is simple, that isn't fluffy in any way, but still has that finesse about it and helps it stand out, which again is quite difficult to do. So I think understanding the basics, like we've talked about, making it about the guest, making it about the benefits, these are the first things that obviously you need to bear in mind when you're creating copy. That to me is like the science part, because that to me is using the right words like you, words that are all about the benefits. Even things like mixing it up with your punctuation, incorporating bullet points, incorporating numbers in your titles and things like that, using the right keywords, understanding which words are more likely to convert, words like now and free. And, this is quite sort of widely known. You can very easily sort of search which words convert most, and you'll get the resources for that. It does change from time to time, but they usually tend to sort of stay relatively the same. So that's basically the science part, knowing which words to use, how to kind of formulate your copy, almost use like an equation. And then the art stuff, I would say, comes in when you take that copy that you formulated against the methods that work, because people engage with them more, they're ticking all the boxes, and then turning it into your own, which I believe, again, is probably something people struggle with most if you aren't maybe somebody who writes very often or reads very often. However, always remember, it's your business, it's your brand. And when people say things like, oh, you're too close to your business to be able to write about it, I really just think that's bullshit. I think if you are so close to something, then of course you'll write about it best. Like when Ryan writes, copy for social media and stuff, there'll always be that sort of thing that he has because it's his baby. So don't let anybody ever tell you that, oh, you're not a writer, you're too close to your business to be able to write about it, because actually that's really bad advice. I think you should be able to leverage that, because that's where the art part comes in. So once you've got the sciencey bit and you know which words to use and stuff like that, there's something that I like to think about a lot when it comes to creating any kind of copy, and that's called a semantic field. And a semantic field is basically like a posh word for theme in English linguistics. So everything you write has some kind of an umbrella theme over it. So, think about your brand. I'm actually going to use, if it's okay, Ryan, Boostly's brand for this, because it's very easy to explain. So Boostly, Mark Simpson. Boostly has quite a strong brand identity. The logo is a rocket. The name of the brand is Boostly. It's all about skyrocketing, direct bookings and things like that. So his semantic field, his theme, he didn't realize this when, we started working together, but his theme has always been about, boosting and skyrocketing and, using words within sort of that field, like he likes using words like soaring and strong words. And actually, that's where the branding part comes in. So when we started creating, if we were to start creating content for Mark, again, for his website, we'd know which high converting words to use, we'd know which keywords to use, we'd know how to formulate the copy, how many words to use, how to hit all those pain points, but then we'd dress it up with brand friendly words, friendly to Mark's brand. So the science part is like dressing your copy in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. The art part and the branding part and making it your own is like the matching earrings and the belts and the shoes. That's the stuff that's going to help it stand out. Same with Room 22, for example. Ryan had this phenomenal idea of creating a club and a community, and then we worked together to have this whole idea of a room, a secret room with the number 22, having a very powerful connotation. And then if you look at Rune22's website, we talk about unlocking your success and giving you the keys and things like that. And yeah, you know, sometimes, you know, you can overdo it and it can sound very gimmicky and cliched, but actually if you do it in the right way, that's how brands are created. So that's where the science and the art stuff comes in, because when we were creating Rune22, for example, we hit the pain points straight away, but then we dressed it up to make sure that Rune22, you know, didn't just sound like any other club, because of course it's not like any other club. You know, we talk about inclusivity, we talk about how it's, you know, leveling, you know, the playing field. And these are the things, that's when you start thinking about your values and your philosophies. And I know it sounds like a lot, but if you can kind of bear it in mind when it comes to creating any content, especially for your website, especially for things like your homepage, then I cannot tell you how much it'll help your content sing. It's just pure gold. It really is.
No, it is. I think you can also you can take the whole branding idea and you can filter it down into your properties. And you know, this is something that I feel I've done too late, but better late than never. And I'm sure I've got plenty of years left in this industry, so you know, it's better to start now. But I didn't think about branding at the beginning. I was just like, oh, I'm going to get some properties. I'm just going to stick some furniture in them, and away we go. But I now have, you know, brand standards. We now have a brand theme that we have, you know, 3 color palettes within the property. We only use those color palettes. That's all over the world. We, you know, because we are expanding globally, we chose furniture and colors that are in every single worldwide location, you know, in terms of B&Qs and things like that. So, you know, very well thought of all the way down. The stuff that goes in the properties, it's all branded, it all links back and ties back to the main brand. And, you know, I still feel like we've got a lot of work to do on that, but there's been 18 months of real thought gone into that. And we're starting to, you know, see the benefit of that. You know, I want to get it to a point where anyone sees one of our properties on either the booking channel or our website, they all look the same within reason. It's different, but the same. Everyone knows that, all right, we're checking into a Luke Stage property. Everyone knows that they're going to get a certain experience by booking that type of property. And I think that's when your brand really starts to align and really show. And that's when you become a great business in my mind, because that's when your brand takes over then and you don't really need to do much more. And but getting to that point, you've got to, as Neely says, focus. You know, there was a lot of thought went into the whole design of this club. You know, just an idea. And me 3-4 years ago would have just chose some random crap name and just put a website up and then tried my hardest to sell it and get people in and done it that way. But you know, now that you know, as you develop as a business person and you meet great, you know, entrepreneurs who've got other ideas and great ideas, you bounce off one another and eventually you create these much better things. And it all does come back down to, you know, copywriting, the words, and engagement. I think is probably the biggest word that we're trying to, you know, crack in our industry is engagement. And whether that's getting landlords, vendors, or you know, estate agents to engage with us, or we're getting guests to engage with us, we can do that through the words that we use, whether we're communicating verbally or whether we're communicating via our websites. And a lot of people don't, you know, a lot of people don't give that enough credit. You know, if I was, you know, I've done a lot on communication skills over the years, you know, sales skills, negotiation skills, and just general communication skills. And, you know, learning when you're emotionally invested, you know, your communication can be actually very poor verbally. Especially if you're heightened emotionally in the wrong way. And, you know, I think when we talk about writing on a website, we almost want to get the guest emotionally connected, and that will increase your booking conversion, no doubt.
Yeah, that's perfect. We are, I mean, whatever business you're in, whatever you're trying to sell, you know, people always make decisions based on their emotions and then they justify with logic afterwards. So, yeah. That's perfect. I think that's the best way to explain it.
Does anyone have any questions on anything we've gone through? Happy to if you want to jump on and ask any questions that anyone's got. Obviously we're going to be you know, there's more and more going to be happening in the group. I think I explained briefly last week for those that weren't on or didn't catch the replay. Obviously, there's an affiliate scheme now. If you just go on the website, you can sign up to be an affiliate and you can get paid for building the community. I am, I was speaking to Mark Simpson this morning from Boostly, and, you know, he has agreed to come into it as well. Super Hog are going to come into it as well. And I've got loads of other conversations happening, and there's only like great things going to keep happening. We'll keep having sessions like this, and just really expanding everybody's, knowledge. And it's more about expanding your networks, really, and expanding your business brain outside of the sort of STR bubble that we all live in, because it's quite difficult. You get trapped in it, and you just think that I've just got to speak to estate agents and I've got a business, but there's so much more involved in that. And I think sometimes you need to sort of step back out of it and have a look at, okay, well, where do I want my business to be? What does my brand look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Because one thing that we're all building is a sellable asset. So, and a lot of people don't think like that, and I certainly didn't when I got into it, but the more properties you get under your belt, they're more likely you're going to get bought out. Sykes Cottages, for example, when you get to 650 units, you can knock on their door and they will buy your business. So, you've all got businesses that you're building to sell, but if you don't build it in the right way with the right brand, then it's going to be worth less. So you've got to make sure that you focus on that as you're building it, rather than I'll just take any old property on, I'll take any old, property management deal on, and so on and so forth. And I've made these mistakes, so the idea is you don't. And, we've got rid of 60 or so units in the last 6 months, if not more, because they don't fit brand standards anymore. Owners won't do the properties up. They're not willing to invest in them to keep up in line with the competition. And they're just no good. They're more hassle than they're worth. So, you get rid of them. And but I kind of wish I'd never taken them on in the first place. But I guess